Well, we made it back, my man. Another Monday night edition of Dogging It with Molina Mike and a much better looking Joey Ryan. Michael Panozzo, Billiards Digest magazine. Boy, that's a tongue twister. How are you, Mike?
Good, good. Good to be back.
Well,
Monday night with
I,
like Howard Cosell and Don Meredith.
yeah, no kidding, right? That might be, I know that, but that might be some, before some of these, for some of this fan base's time, Mike.
Yeah. I
But
watched I watched the very first Monday Night Football.
did you? Wow. You
Oh
know what?
yeah.
They had some great commentators along the way, including John Madden, rest the soul, man.
Yeah.
I can remember listening to John and Pat Summerall
Yeah.
growing up as a kid, and I love. I mean, I commentary for me goes a long way when it comes to sporting events. I think about
100%.
yeah. I mean, I think about Joe Buck and Troy Aikman when it comes to football. I think about um, oh my God, Bob Costas in ESPN. I mean, not ESPN, NBC. Excuse me,
NBC.
the
Yeah.
Olympics. Who's the gentleman? Nah, I can't believe I'm dogging it. But who's the gentleman with the Masters every year? Hello, friends. Jim Nance. Jim Nance.
Jim Nance, yeah.
So, yeah, just certain people. When I hear their voice, it just takes me to that place. So,
Yeah. For
anyway,
sure. For
anyway,
sure.
I'm rambling.
Whoever
If if you guys can hear us in the chat, please let us know. We got the commentary up, so hopefully, I'm sorry, the chat up. So if you guys can hear us, the audio's coming in well. Please let us know. We appreciate everybody for joining in with us this evening. Um, yeah, man, we're excited. I wanted to bring you on, Mike, because I was able to go and catch your article or your post on social media regarding your article about the Mosconi Cup. And for those who haven't seen it, Mike, let everybody know, like in a nutshell, what they missed.
well, it was just I watch social media a lot like everybody else, and every year we go through the same thing about fans pontificating over what to do to make the Mosconi Cup more competitive, and the Americans suck, and the Europeans' seventh team could be favored, and it should be the rest, Europe versus Asia, and all that kind of stuff. And the
I
Mosconi
feel like
Cup's
I'm being attacked here, Mike. I feel like I'm being attacked here just on that first sentence.
and people talk about should the Mosconi Cup and the threat of going away, and it just made me laugh. And so I thought, I know it's only March, but here's here's the thing to me that sets the tone for it all is that we're talking about it in March. Okay, so
Yeah.
please don't tell me that the Mosconi Cup has one foot in the grave because we're talking about it in March. And my point was that people go through this all the time. When U.S. was trouncing Europe, it was the Mosconi Cup's going to go away. When Europe was trouncing the U.S., the Mosconi Cup's going to go away. And fans get in this notion that unless it's a cliffhanger every year, that people are going to lose interest. And it's just not the case. I mean, all you have to do is look at the live gate. It's gotten bigger every year. It got bigger every year. Europe was winning every year. It got bigger when the U.S. won a couple of times. It got bigger the last couple of years when Europe has come back and won again. So, just the whole point of the article was just, listen, guys, this isn't going to go away, and here's why. And my points were basically that just the fact that everybody talks about it for 12 months is the proof in the pudding that this is something that people care about, and they're not going to stop caring about. And my team can lose 12 years in a row, and I'm still going to be there in the next year in the front row, wishing and hoping, and that my team wins. It's like being a Cleveland Browns fan sometimes.
I was gonna say,
So
Mike, and that statement right there really resonates with me because when you're a sports fan or you're a fan of a team or a player or whatever, like you're in it no matter what. It doesn't matter. The Browns in all their years of horrid, I can count the number of wins on my probably on my hand that they've won over the, besides this last 2 years in the previous like 10 years, right? Because
right.
they've been that terrible of a team. But it's true, Mike. I mean, it's like this is the one event in pool in sports where like it really strikes a chord with people across the world, Americans especially.
it goes beyond whether your team is good or not. It's
Yeah.
pride. It's a sense of this. These are my guys. And I even wrote in the article. There might be even players on a team you don't even like, But for those 4 days,
Yeah,
they're your guys, and it's just something that's very deep inside you that you can't stay away from, and you always hold out hope. I mean, I mentioned the article. You don't. We have to deal with the realities of the everyday world every day that we're going to work, every day we're living. We don't have to
right.
be realistic about our teams and about who we root for. I don't care if they're an underdog 13 years in a row. I got belief that this year is going to be the year they're going to turn around, and so that's what keeps driving you. And just the natural rivalry between Europe and the U.S. It's perfect. I don't believe that Europe against Asia would it be a better contest? Probably, but sorry, it's just not going to have the same appeal that Mosconi Cup has. They're just not that natural, us against them feeling, and that's what you have with U.S. and Europe, and it doesn't matter how many years in a row somebody wins, everybody's going to show up.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of points in that article that I really agree with, and then there's some points in that article where I was just like, "Come on, Mike, you're just trying to get me riled up over here. You're just trying to get me tilted." Okay,
All right,
number
come at me.
one, I
Come at me.
there's listen, there's sometimes I agree with you. Rivalries in sports is huge. We see it all the time. UNC and Duke, Red Sox and the Yankees. I mean, I can really go on, and you can just pick a sport like the Cowboys and the Giants or the Cowboys and whoever in football. I mean, rivalry in sport is is so massive, and it doesn't matter how relevant or irrelevant your team is. You're always going to go and tune in. I remember like seeing years of where maybe a Duke team or UNC team wasn't as relevant. I know we're in March right now, but like I still wanted to go and watch, Yankees every year with the biggest payroll in baseball, and then they're below 500. As when that Red Sox matchup lines up on a Friday night, and I want to go and hear Bob Costas, make the call on MLB, I'm there and I'm watching, and it doesn't matter, and that's the beauty of it. And I love how that time of year for us in pool, it really gets people in their heart, in their soul, in their being. Because, like, if you're rooting for Europe, you're not my friend, Mike. I don't care who you are. Like, you get it gets these emotions out of people that like we don't get to see the other 11 months of the year, right?
Right.
Um,
True.
it's a pretty special event, but I'll say this: this is, and I really believe it. I don't see how adding in a third wheel could go and ruin an event or take away from it, Mike. Help me get there. Help me understand that, because
Oh,
I
I'm not saying that Europe against Asia wouldn't work. I'm not saying it wouldn't be interesting. I'm just saying it would not have the same appeal and it would not have the same visceral response
for sure.
that Europe against the U.S. has. So yeah, I'd love to see Europe play Asia. I'd love to see the U.S. play Asia. But I mean, and golf and tennis, they all have secondary and tertiary,
Right.
international competitions, the President's Cup and things like that. Um, and they broaden the field and they bring the rest of the world in. But it doesn't have the same impact as Ryder Cup. It doesn't have the same impact as Davis Cup. It just doesn't. So you kind of know if you think that it would be on a level field from a fan standpoint and a 12th a year discussion standpoint, I just don't think it would get there.
No, but you know what, Mike? This doesn't happen overnight. Like we've seen, it seems like over the last, let's say, 3 or 4 years, especially, the Mosconi Cup has really just full steam ahead, and is really just revving its engine. I mean, we saw ticket sales, like Matthew McConaughey said in the chat, like ticket sales went and sold out very fast. I think within a matter of minutes, if I'm not mistaken. Then they released some of the production seats, and even then, I mean, it's the hottest ticket. And I remember after the event, and I was talking with Emily about this. Like, I really thought they missed the boat for not going and capitalizing on that momentum and opening up ticket sales right away. But here we are, Mike. It was February, and they still sold out. People are planning for this, you know, 10 months in advance, 9 months in advance. That's crazy, man. And I love the direction, but I think that it could be developed. I think that those, I'm not saying that an Asia versus Europe wouldn't go and sell out as quickly, or maybe have that same emotion that you go and have, but I wouldn't go and bet that it couldn't go and get there at some point within the next few years, because I really do believe their fans, and I think that was one part of your article that kind of put me on tilt because you were like, there'll be 100 people there, and I don't believe it, man, because I know a lot of Filipinos who root for their country like no other, Mike. I mean, when you see a Filipino go and win an event, their first like love and thank you. I mean, besides like they give respect to God and all those things, but it's to their country, Mike, and it doesn't matter what event they're in. They're playing for the mother homeland over there.
Are they getting on a plane and flying to London for the version that's over there? And I don't know. I mean, there were a lot of events in the Philippines, and they always had massive crowds in malls looking down from the railings and all that kind of stuff. They weren't paid crowds. Okay, so
Right.
the Mosconi Cup right now, the gate for the Mosconi Cup is what allows Matchroom to fade the World Cup of Pool, no gate, World Pool Masters, no gate. I mean, that's a huge part of it. So you can't discount what that means to
You
the
think
event.
that holds up for the rest of the events? Like it's carrying the load, so to speak.
Well, I mean, it just, yeah, I mean, I think that it's not like it pays for the rest of the events, but
Right.
it cushions the blow, right? So, but I think you'll start to see. I'd be very surprised if the U.S. Open this year didn't have a good gate. I'd be very surprised if the UK Open didn't have a good gate. So, the Mosconi Cup serves a lot of purposes, and and you talked before about over the course of time, Europe against Asia could get there. Sure, it could. History is such a huge part of any sport, and
For
pool
sure.
doesn't have a lot of history in
No,
terms of long-standing events. The U.S. Open, the Mosconi Cup, those are the two biggest. And so I think that they're getting to the point now with generating interest in the Mosconi Cup and then the rest of their season and coming out with new arenas and better seating, things like I think you'll start to see paid audiences start to show up. U.S. Open, UK Open, those would be the two that I would think would be the most natural next steps for them in terms of starting to build a crowd to the point where, over the next 5 years, you want to see all these events on the calendar be like the big darts events where they'll get 3, 4,000, five
it'd
thousand,
be
eight thousand
nuts, Mike.
people
Have you
to
ever
every
seen one of
event.
those? I mean, it gets pretty wild. It gets pretty wild in that crowd, and it's crazy because they're all just sitting there like what looks like picnic tables, you know, hammering it up,
It's
and
like a
it's
big
the
German beer
craziest thing.
hall.
Yeah, yeah, and people are going nuts, and I love it. And you're right, man. Like history is it's rooted, man. It's like the Bears and the Packers. It doesn't
Well,
matter.
I was going to
It,
bring that up before because you
yeah,
talked about that. I mean, I'm from Chicago. I'm a Bears fan.
right.
There were years where we, in the '80s, where we pummeled the Packers, and now since Aaron Rodgers, we've won probably about 6 times in 20 years. But every game against them is a sellout. Every game against them has everybody on the edge of their seat. Every game is throwing, trash talk at each other. That's the same
For sure.
thing with the Mosconi Cup. It's that same, it's in your heart. It's in your gut. And
We're
it
raised
doesn't
on it,
matter
Mike.
who wins and how often. It's not going away.
It's compelling. And the one thing, this is one of my big when I think about this topic, especially, I'm curious what your thoughts are, but like what happens when Captain America hangs it up? Because I think we've been able to fade a lot over, let's say, the last 5 years. And what I mean by that is, and I guess matching to an extent, USA won after, let's say, a decade of not doing anything, right? So that kind of like saved their asses and bought them some more time. It's like a terrible coach, Mike, in football, right? Where like they win a Super Bowl, okay, we're gonna forget those eight
Signature
game
win.
records.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're gonna go and buy yourself, at least 5 more years, and then now, storylines is what helps keep sports relevant. And I know that the the record books won't go and reflect how close or how compelling or how exciting the Mosconi Cup was, but like I remember Jeremy doing all these things, and I know it's just a few months ago, right? I remember these guys fighting, their asses off, a few months ago, and that's gonna help me be that much more engaged, that much more willing to go to Vegas, and I think a lot of fans kind of feel the same way. But what happens when those storylines aren't there, Mike? What happens when Shane ain't there no more, and you got a team full of Tyler and Chris and these young kids, and if they're going and getting demolished, like what happens then? Can they still go and sustain?
Well, you develop storylines, and all these players are going to get better as it goes over time. And you just keep slugging away. I mean, you get a good coach in there, you get a good captain in there, and you get more out of talent than other people think you can get out of them. That's the way that goes. Same in any kind of sport with any kind of coach and any kind of team. You lose your superstar player or the guy who's carried the load for a lot of years, and you rebuild a little bit, but you develop that sense in players that they can do anything if they want to. And
Yeah.
and we bring this up all the time. It doesn't make any difference, if one team's favored, they're favored. But it's still, you know, races the five. Anybody on a
Handball.
team might play 3 or 4 times in the tournament, and that's it. So it's not, it's not impossible. It's not in the realm of possibility for these players to go and do something special. They just have to believe in themselves, and a lot of that comes down to coaching and captains, right?
For sure, absolutely, and I mean we saw that especially this past year. I mean I think coaching and we saw that whenever Team Europe lost. I thought the coaching was a big part of why they took those L's those 2 years. And I'm not going to take anything away from the red, white, and blue and what they did, but I thought that there was some massive missteps when it came to Shamat and his decisions over the 2 or 3 days because I think they thought they were just stealing and they could fade it, they could weather the storm, and they would end up coming out on top and ultimately, for my money, ended up costing him his job. And on the flip side of it, it's like we're kind of just not, I don't want to say dismissing, but kind of like giving Jeremy a pass, so to speak, because he fought his ass off and he showed a lot of heart and was the soul and the backbone and the spirit of that team, kind of like the what Billy might have been for so many years. Like he just inspired him.
Right, right. And that,
Yeah,
yeah, I thought that Jeremy bought, a little more time just by the last year. And really the last 2 years really were kind of,
for sure.
you know, he didn't have much going in his
It's so
favor.
brutal, Mike.
It
It's
was the COVID year, and then it was Earl getting the rug pulled out on him on day one. So, you can't judge Jeremy too harshly on what he's done the last couple of years with the circumstances he's been put in.
the main reason why I've been, I don't want to say campaigning, but or politicking or whatever, but like the main reason why I've been kind of just so excited at this idea of a possible Reyes Cup and bringing in whether it's a Philippines team or Taiwan team or just an Asian contingent as a whole, um, is because I think Team Europe has been kind of just with their feet up at the desk. And I'm not saying they're not working hard, but it's different, Mike, when they've never been an underdog ever in the last, let's say, um,
10, 12 years.
10 years. Yeah, I was gonna say about 10 years. I don't think they've ever been an underdog, Mike. And it's different when you got someone coming at your back, right? Coming for you, as opposed to like them just saying, we're stealing. We're not gonna worry about it. You know?
Yeah, I understand that, but uh, where I kind of disagree with that is that European players, it was different in the early years with the American players putting their feet up and winning every year because it was the same players. They were just pretty much rubber stamped from year to year. Europe, it's a battle. There's a lot of Europeans that would give their left arm to play in the Mosconi Cup. And the ones who get there know what a gift that is and how special that is. And so they always, I think, work hard enough to not want to lose their seat. You got a seat at that table. You don't want to give it up. So there's always
I
a
mean, we
lot of
saw
these.
that with last year. Mike Federer got left off the team, and everybody thought that he was, almost a shoe in, or at least should have been that 5 spot. And I think if Clinton
Yeah,
doesn't go and win the world championship, he's there. But I mean, that proves your point. Just how competitive that those and how coveted those 5 are.
yeah, those spots are gold. So I think that the battle with Europeans to get there, they may feel like they get their feet up on the table when they get there, but even then, I think that that's kind of overrated. I think they know they don't want to be the ones who were on the team that lost. Guarantee you that. So it's there's always going to be that desire for the European players to make the team and to do well.
I don't know how many times that I've been at events, big events like the World 10 Ball coming up, where you have players from all over the world. And I talk to Europeans, and I got friends of mine who are on both teams, but specifically the Europeans, because I'll go and talk to them, and I'll just say, how important is it for you to go and make this team? I won't go mention any names, but like guys who are like on the cusp, or maybe who have felt shorted over the years that they should have been there and they weren't, or like you can tell they feel a little jaded by the process, but at the same time, you can tell in who they are, like when they answer that question of just how much like they strive to go and get there, and it's the number one goal every single year. And that's part of the reason why, for me as a fan and me being friends with a lot of these guys, the new like the more transparency there's going to be when it comes to Matchroom's process of, if you do A, B, and C, and you really are, it really is A, B, and C, because it's going to be the top three. You're going to be guaranteed a spot on this team, and then we're going to have two wild cards. So what's your thought on that, Mike? Like, because you've been through the quote unquote favoritism years, or the years where you're going to have picks based off of certain events, but this feels different, Mike. It feels more proper.
It is more proper, and it needs to be that way. I mean, it's always kind of been unbalanced because they're trying to find this proper way for the Europeans because the Europeans are so deep. At the same time, they almost want to always handpick the American team because they need to make sure that it's the best five guys out there, regardless of how they played in the past year. So there's always been a little bit of an uneven skew there in how the team, for the last 10, 12 years, how the teams
Yep.
were selected. But, for the Europeans, it's, it's really, that makes it a really interesting, thing because, you talk about players who hit, trying to get in there. The easiest thing that I look at are the guys who've been on the team and are in the top level, the top 5, 6 guys in the world, and the next year they don't make the team, and it's crushing. I mean, and it's happened to everybody. It happened to Federer. It happened to Albin a couple of years ago when he got left off. It's happened to Niels when he's gotten left off. David Alcaide, he's been on twice, and you can't believe the guy's only been on there twice or 3 times. So it's a gut punch to these guys when they don't make the team, especially those guys in that top tier when it's 3 automatic picks and only 2 captains picks. There's always going to be that guy who's left off it's going to be crushing.
I remember talking with Federer that first year. I think it was the year that Alex won, and it ended up being uh, like the very last event is how Alex got picked, and it was like deep in that European, that Euro Tour event, and
Yeah,
Alex was literally like, I think Alex was like hill with some, I don't want to say nobody, but guy I never heard of, and I probably haven't heard of him since then. I can see his face, but I don't remember the name. And I remember talking with Federer and just how gutted he was, and he was very like open about it. He was just like, I don't know what I got to do. Like, this is just, he's like, I might just end up going to the States for a year and just saying the hell with this, and I'm gonna just play money matches and play events out there. And I said, man, just stick with it. I said, you're gonna be on the team for the next like 15 years, man. Like, you're that guy who's on deck. Like, I think you're the next Jason or the next Albin or the next Josh, because I think their spots for the next few years are a lock, especially Josh because of how young he is.
right.
But uh and this is like in November, and then the very next month the kid goes on to win the world championship.
Yeah, world
And
champ. Yeah,
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 it was pretty awesome. And I know he felt very slighted again. It's real unfortunate, like, the circumstances in the world going on, and how that's affecting, players of sport all over the world, all across the world.
yeah,
And I think, unfortunately, you know, I I don't see him going and making this team, and I think that'll go and open up another spot, because I think it was, for my money, I think it was automatic that he was going to go and make that European team. Um, but I'm curious, Mike, like, if let's say, right, let's just close our eyes, okay, and let's just say they bring in an Asian contingent. Let's say you got Dennis, and you got the Cole brothers, and you got Chang, and you got, I mean, we're gonna leave off a bunch of names. You got Wu, you got a
Beato.
monster team, Beato, yeah. I mean, just a bunch of, you know, serial killers from top to bottom, Mike. Do you think that, how can I say this? Like, do you think that they'll have the stomach for that stage? Because that stage is unlike any other in our sport, Mike.
It depends. It would depend on if the stage is the stage. I mean, I don't think the first time Europe plays Asia, you're going to get 3,000 people in Alley Pally. I
Right.
could be wrong, but that would be a surprise to me. But you know, the Asian players, they can fade some pressure. They know how to
Yeah.
do that. I think it would be great matchup. The more interesting thing to me is, you know, they don't play as a team much,
No, no,
especially between countries. So and the Europeans, they do. They have team events in the European Championship. They play. They're a little more used to that kind of thing. And in the U.S., all the players, they're U.S. players. They know each other. They hang out with each other. They say it's a different. It's easier for the USA players. So I think the Asian players, it would be the toughest fit to have them, really kind of to find some cohesion. Might take a year or two to do it, and that's only going to happen if they really feel like there's something at stake, pride, that type of thing. And I don't know. I mean, does Dennis playing a team with Chang and the Cole brothers or whatever? Are they going to live and die by what they do in the Reyes Cup?
yeah. I mean, Dennis is notorious for not being. I know he's won a World Cup of pool, but outside of that, like he's notorious for not being a great team player. I remember years ago it was a big 10 ball doubles event, and this is probably, man, Mike, this is probably maybe like 8 to 10 years ago, and him and Shane were partners, and this is like in the height of like everything of about them, right? This is in the height of like
Should
Shane's
robbing
great,
people.
yeah. I mean, left and right, you name it, right? And I was like, oh my god, they're gonna be partners, and it was so great. And I stayed up to like 4 in the morning to go and watch this matchup. And I think they literally got robbed by like some kids who were like 14 and 13 years old. And I think it was a young Cheska Santano, who she's a world champion, but at the time
Yeah,
she was just a teenager, and I forgot who her partner was, but I couldn't believe it. And then like years later, every time I would go and see Dennis playing doubles, it was like he doesn't show up because he's such an alpha, and it's hard for him to kind of be that team
yeah,
guy. I was in Vegas a few months back when I saw him and Roland play Billy and Shane in one pocket, and they're playing even, and they're playing by the game. And you would think like, oh, they're supposed to be stealing. It wasn't even close. I mean, there was
yeah,
just like no rhyme or rhythm to it. And I think there would be some learning curve to it, but I think that would be part of like the
yeah,
beauty of it, because I want to see him go and stumble. I want to see them get nerves unlike any other. I want to see how much pride they're going to go and have if they win. I want to see the Europeans, more importantly, face some heat, because I haven't really seen it except for like, maybe 2 years back to back, a few years back. But besides
yeah.
that, I really haven't seen like that level of intensity or that kind of like fire on their asses, Mike.
Yeah, last year was close, and if we could have gotten a couple of games on that third day and turned the fourth day into a dog race, it would have been interesting to see. Because you see what happens when you put pressure on them. And I'm not saying that the Europeans fold under pressure, but those 2 years, with the Americans leading going into the fourth day, it's a different European team. I mean,
Yeah, it really.
there's all still some of the best players in the world, but everything's a little bit different when you're chasing, and you got a little bit of doubt in your mind, things like that. So that's the whole, key to it is putting pressure on the favorite, and that's the way it is in any sport, right? Put pressure on them, see how they handle it. Again, I just with an Asian thing, just hard for me to imagine them, you know, having that kind of sense of national pride that would make it really really important to them, that it would be do or die. The Americans play that way, the Europeans play that way. I just don't, I don't know, it'd be interesting to see.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, I love having these conversations because it's great. And like, I'm not saying the American team should not be going to the Mosconi Cup because of relevancy or competitiveness or any of that. Because, I don't want to see that, I don't want to see what's an amazing and special event be taken away. I just think that, from just a pure sport and competitiveness standpoint, I would love to go and see it kind of shaken up a bit. Now I'm not saying go and throw in, five of the teams. I don't want it to be like the World Cup of Pool, because I want the World Cup of Pool to be the World Cup of Pool. I want that to stay its own event. And this is part of like what I've seen from like Matchroom over the years, because I'm a fan of the World Pool Masters, Mike. I love it. Every year it's a big, seeing Kazakis go and win last year after, him, you know, dogging it a few times on the big stages or, in finals. That part was pretty special to me. But then I have like the CLP or PLP event, which kind of like it's it's similar and similar in the sense like we're getting all the players together. They're gonna go and play all week. They're gonna go and play a tournament style. But I like how special the World Pool Masters is, on its own.
It's a great event.
Um,
It's the oldest event they have, I think, really.
yeah, no, for sure. And this
Actually, a year old.
calendar,
Mosconi Cup.
Is it really?
I think so.
Yeah, it's absolutely one of my favorites, but I don't want the Mosconi Cup to turn into something that's like diluting that, if that makes any sense, you know. But there's
Yeah.
a lot of
Well,
events coming up, Mike. I mean, in the it's good to have this debate, and we're gonna go and see these teams kind of shape up in the next like 3 months, Mike, and it's gonna go and start with the World Championship on April 6th through the 10th of this year. It's gonna be at Milton Keys at the Marshall Arena. I'm curious, Mike, what storylines do you see going into it? What storylines do you see coming out of it?
Um, it's just going to be interesting to see. I mean, last year I thought they did a really nice job with the World Championship. It was good. That was an event that to me was, relative. I mean, it had a nice ring to it, but it was relatively insignificant to me relative to the other big pool events in the year when it was in, the Middle East for all those years. But last year, Matchroom took it back to the level it should be. So it's bigger money. Yeah, it's gonna be a great event. I mean, it favors the Europeans obviously because the Asians still aren't traveling in big groups, and the U.S. just doesn't travel to those European events a whole heck of a lot. So, but it's going to be a dogfight. There's a lot at stake in addition to being the world champion. Trying to lock up a spot in Mosconi Cup. Um, you know, just big performances there can take a lot of players a long way this year.
Yeah, it can really go and catapult you, and can
Yeah.
go and just and spark your career, or even put you on the map for that matter. If you're kind of one of these guys who's just hanging around a bubble, like it can really put you on the radar. The biggest for
Well,
me,
look,
Mike, is go ahead.
well, I was just saying, I mean, last year, I mean, when was the last time anybody in the U.S. talked about Jeremy Sosi? You
Yeah,
know,
yeah. I mean, he's kind of been one of these guys where it's like,
but he had this good run, and all of a sudden,
yeah,
he was on everybody's radar again. They're talking about him from Mosconi Cup and things like that. So yeah, I mean, a good performance, really kind of puts you in people's consciousness.
yeah. And for my money, I heard he had a really good shot at making that team. I mean, like he was one of those. I want to say three players who was in, or even four players who was like right there, and how difficult
Right?
the decision it was for Jeremy. But you're right, because before then nobody ever really talked about him. But he goes and makes a deep run. He's beaten Robbie Capito on the TV stage, and for those who don't know, Robbie's a monster. He's from Hong Kong. He's a former world junior champion, and when he came on my radar personally was the year that Carlo won his first world title, because I remember seeing his name in the quarters, I think it was, and I was like, who the hell is this kid? And I go back and I look at who all he beat leading up to it. Off the top of my head, I can't think of it, but he took down some names, and it seems to be picking up right where he's left off and picking up some more momentum. The kid's young, and this is part of like what you get. I mean, I remember last year seeing the kid Moritz out of Germany. He had Jason on the ropes in his matchup,
Yeah.
and that kid is still causing damage over there in Euro tours. But it's like if you don't have these events, you're never gonna go and get little like beauties of players that are just gonna go and show who they are. Uh, prior to the World Championships, I think Shane was in Hungary, I think, where Oliver's from, and they were sparring with each other, warming up. And then come to find out, Oliver was the one who ended up sending Shane home at the World Championships, when there was a lot of people, and myself were included in that this was going to be Shane's year. This was his time. He had that breakdown. He was snapping it. He was popping it. He was squatting it. He was getting shape on the one. I mean, it was like, this is Shane's going to do it. Shane's going to do it. And then he runs into Oliver. But like, we don't get these storylines if we don't get to watch, if we don't get to see Matchroom go and take over. And as someone who's watched World Championships over the years, Mike, I can tell you it's been brutal to go and watch them out of Qatar. I mean, from a terrible feel to
Yeah.
a terrible quality of internet. I mean, you
Yeah.
you just name it. I could not have been more
Terrible
thrilled to see.
facility. The facility was
Yeah,
always lousy. Yeah, no, I think one of the things you touched on that's really important is as Matchroom gets more involved in these, and as social media and streaming becomes a bigger thing, um, being able to see all these tournaments round by round, see all these players, that makes such a huge difference in these players, advancing and in people's interest in the sport. As opposed to those years where all you basically saw were flow charts, and that was your way of knowing who did well and who didn't. So being able to watch all the matches is such a key thing. You're talking about Shane and Oliver, and what do you know what the World Championship's going to be this year in terms of the racking? As last year they switched the rack when it got to the single elimination, and there was a lot of discussion about that. Has there been word yet about what that's going to be this year?
I don't know, Mike, off the top of my head.
Yeah.
I guess I wouldn't be surprised if they kept it the same. I wouldn't be surprised if they changed it to where it's just going to be ref racking throughout. Personally, I hate to see players go and manipulate a rack, and and the other side of it is I don't want to see you racking for your opponent either, because I don't want to see that guy going, and I don't want it to be like Turning Stone, right, where you're racking for your opponent, and then the guy's coming over and he's looking at the rack left and right, and he's doing yoga poses, and then he's like, look at right here, look at this guy there, and then they go and they start barking at each other, interpret, and they go back and try to fix it. It's brutal. I like the idea of it being taken out of their hands, and it reminds me of like in football when you have penalties, or in baseball when you have a strike zone. To me, it's no different as a sports fan when it comes to ref in the rack. I mean, we'd like it to be obviously tight and together, but things happen. You're not always gonna you're not always gonna go and get a perfect rack, but you got to go and adapt, Mike.
It's about professionalism in sports. I mean,
Right.
I don't know if it was Emily or who was talking. He said, the first time I watched this, and this is, a professional event, and it's a world championship, whatever, and the players are racking their own balls, and you're thinking, what are they doing? How do they allow this to happen? That would be like, playing pro football, and the defense gets to spot the ball. Well, you're not going to get a couple pretty bad spots along the way. It's about professionalism. So yeah, I'd like to think that that all their events in the next couple of years, it'll all be referee racking, and no looking at the rack, no doing this. Just take the balls and break them, and bring the big break back into the game, and take the manipulation out of it, and let's move forward and make everything consistent. That would be the ideal situation, right?
I remember asking Federer point blank, on this very question as far as which you'd prefer, and he would said, "I'd rather get slugged than to have someone cheat me." And he was
That's
very
a good answer. Good way of looking at it.
He was very candid about it and very matter of fact, and I respected him a lot more from that, because he's game just to go and play pool. What I get is what I get, and I'm gonna go and bust them up, and then whatever I get left over afterwards, I'm gonna use my tools and my resources and on my training to go and make sure I put that 9-ball in the hole, and that's part of what I love. And it can be tough at times, when it gets deep in an event. And as someone who has been to a lot of events over the last few years, like when it gets kind of close and it's, close to hill or right around there, or like a 9-8 kind of scenario or 7-8 scenario. And then you can hear the bad rap and the players get on tilt, and it's tough to go and watch. It is, because you want to see them have successes, but it's part of sports, Mike. And I don't want to see them have the ability to go and manipulate it. I just don't. And I'm not gonna shy away from that. And I think that's the direction they're going in as far as Matchroom.
Yeah, if you're going to have a set number of tour events, things like that, there's going to have to be standards like that are going to be in there. Is that going to happen at every event around the world, every event in the U.S.? No, because it's a matter of what you can afford to do. I mean, you're not going to go to a 10-ball event in Louisiana or wherever and have 16 qualified refs racking balls on each team.
Sure.
It's just not going to happen. So you have to try to find, okay, what do you think is the most sensible, given the fact that we can't have all these refs. But if you're going to have what you're going to consider a professional tour, professional circuit, all these events are going to be on TV, things like that, then the standards got to be 100% referees racking the balls, and just get out of the way.
Yeah, for sure. And we're going to go and see that also in the next 2 weeks, Mike, when we go and have a world champion being crowned out in Las Vegas. The Predator CSI 10-ball event. It's going to be 10 days of just nothing but 10-ball greatness. And I actually love the game. It can be tough, though, seeing these guys go and have a referee racking with a triangle and 10-ball. But I love the moving part that you end up with afterwards. Like,
Right.
You don't get to see the big breaks from Shane. You don't get to see the big breaks from like Federer, for example. You get to see a lot of safeties and kicking and moving and ticky tack kind of pull for a while. But I love that, man. Like I really really enjoy it. You get to see a lot more jumping, and we're gonna have a world champion being crowned, and more importantly, Mike, it's the return of some players from Asia in the Co brothers that are going to be coming back to the States for their first time in at least 2 years, Mike.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see. It's so good to see them back, and I want to see Chang back, and I want to see, Lee back. I want to see all these guys, back in action. It's gonna be interesting to see how the Cole brothers play. I think all three of them are playing, correct?
Yeah.
And so it's, they haven't been in this kind of international competition in 2 years. I mean, think about that. So it's going to be interesting to see how they handle it, how different it's going to be, and whether it's really noticeable that they've been out of commission or whether they pick up. I mean, they're great players, so they haven't been sitting on their couch for the last 2 years. But getting in there in international competition with the title on the line and you lose, you go home type of situation, it'll be interesting to see how they play.
I remember seeing Alex when he first came, when like things were opening up and he came back to the States after COVID, and he did not look like Alex. He looked like a shell of himself. Like his cue ball was all over the place. And I was in Des Moines, I think it was last year, when he was playing Tony and it was off the stream table. Uh, and I couldn't believe how all over the place he was. Dennis, whenever he came back from COVID, it took him about a good, 3-4 months to
Yeah,
really get back in his like fighting shape, you know. Um, and I just a number of different players, it was the same thing. And I think the only thing that bodes well for him is the fact that they've had each other to spar with over the last, 2 years essentially. And what greater, than to have, world champions and a kid who probably will end up being a world champion and the youngest brother uh, to go and knock him around with. Ko Ping Chung really never had a chance to defend his title, and that part really like hits me in the stomach because I was a big little Ko fan for a lot of years. So whenever he won, it was pretty awesome to go and see, and I'm looking
yeah,
forward to seeing him at least have a chance at it. Realistically speaking, I don't have a lot of expectations because when I saw Chang come back last year, he didn't look like
yeah.
the same Chang Junlin. He did not look dominating. He did not look like people were. Well, I mean, he still had the factor, but like once the game started playing, like his game didn't go and scare you like it did before. Like
Yeah.
certain players have that ability, Mike, like Josh or Shane or whatever. And Chang was one of those guys, but he didn't have it. He wasn't like in full pool gear when he came back last year.
Yeah, it's like you've got to play on a regular basis. You've got to have some. You got to get in there and take a couple of lumps and fight back and remember what it was like and get your edge back and get your precision back. And so, yeah, I would not have really high expectations for the World 10 ball for some of these players. But it was a little different last year because everybody was in kind of the same boat, right? So they were all basically, rusty. But now
Everybody
you've got
was, yeah,
a
man.
lot of players who've been playing a lot in the past year, and the Co's coming in who just haven't. And it's gonna be a tall order for them.
It's a monkey wrench, and I love it. I don't know what I'm going to go and expect from a Mike, but I'm not going to go and say I think it's world title or bust. But those guys are competitive, and I'm sure they expect a lot out of themselves, and they train a lot, and uh, it's it's going to be interesting, and this is going to be the first event they come back to, and they're going to follow that up with an appearance at the World Championship. I'm assuming we're going to go and see them for the World Cup of Pool, and I'm guessing it will be the Co brothers. At least for my money, I think it'll be.
Yeah,
I'd imagine that any spots that are left back are for players like these guys, like for the UK Open. So I'm sure not all of them are taken, because it's a smart thing to do to hold some spots back instead, in case some of these guys do go and return. I think that they're a huge wild card, Mike, and they're a threat to anybody. And that's what I love about it because it's not just some random guy coming in that's going to go and screw the queue together.
yeah, yeah. I think, like I said, the opportunity for them to play 2, 3, 4, pretty significant international events in a row. It'll allow them to shake the cobwebs a little bit and to get back into fighting shape. a little bit quicker. And they're they're really dedicated kids. They're really dialed into their practice and their playing, and they're not big, outgoing partiers. They're not going to come in 30 pounds overweight because they haven't played in the last 2 years. That would double Little Co's weight.
Yeah, no
So
kidding.
I think I wouldn't expect a lot of them at the World 10 Ball, but I think they'll get into playing shape pretty quickly.
Yeah,
Who do you like? Who do you like at the 10 Ball?
it's real unfortunate that Federer's not going to be able to play, and I'm going to continue to say this for the next 9 months in any event because I think he's a threat, no matter what it is. So I'll start with that. But well, you put me on the spot here, Mike. I don't know
I
what.
figured it was either you're
Yeah,
going to do it to me or I'm going to do it to you. So I
and actually, I was thinking about
may
doing it
as
to
well
you.
jump in there
Uh,
too.
yeah, no kidding. I appreciate that. Um, I don't know. I mean, obviously you can't go on anything that says that's got a 10 in the front of it. You're gonna have Van Boning in probably the last 16 at a minimum. Would be my guess. Um, but I mean, Kachi, I guess if he won it last year, so why wouldn't you go and think, even though he really hasn't had a lot of successes since? I mean, I know he
Yeah,
won this Predator event,
yeah.
out
He's
there.
not. He's
It's
not in my top five. That's for sure.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, Rick said in the chat as far as Chang, I mean, I don't know if he's going to go and be there, so that remains to be seen. And I've seen yeah, I know I've seen the players list, and I don't think his name is on there, but I'll have to go back and double check because I don't think the Co brothers were on there either. And of course, now they are. Um, Boy, oh boy, Mike, I don't know, man. I mean, there's a lot of players who are playing really great pool right now. Kazakis comes to mind because he's been, playing great. You give Josh an open table, even though he's not considered like an elite 10 ball breaker. I'm not going to go and put my money against them.
Where do you put
Jason,
where do you put someone like Albin in the 10 ball? Not very high.
well, it's different if they're racking with the template because then I think it's going to be more traditional as far as guys who are going to go and do
Run
better,
out. Yeah.
like the Shanes and the Fetters of the world. But because it's going to be a referee rack and it's going to be a triangle, it really just leaves the door wide open for these guys. And of course, Albin just knows how to close. He may be if you have him down in the match, you better put him away because he's not the guy you want to go and leave a foot in there. Um, and I know those names are chalk and vogue right now, and they're Telfer like. I'll put it like
Yeah, I
that,
was
Mike.
just going to say, you
Yeah,
sound like a funny Jim Telford there.
yeah, yeah. They're very
Time.
they're very Telfer like. But boy, I don't know, Mike. I'm curious if we're going to see any more Filipinos come back. I know Carlos going to be out there,
That was
but I don't know
that
if
was a
like
big
if like
event.
Chua.
That was a big event last year for Yep. Um, I'd be interested to see how he does this year. There were some surprises last year, and it'd be interesting to see if they hold form.
Yeah, Mike Check brought up a really good name in Alex, and a triangle rack really bodes well for a player like Alex because you're not going to go and outmove him, and he's going to break from the side, and he's going to make it a mess, and you're going to have to go and push out after the break, and you're going to have to play his game of pool. It's not like these guys who are just so stubborn where they're going to go and break, from center table, hope they get a traditional break, and then, oh no, wait a minute, you're not. You're going to go and sell out to your opponent, right? Um, so he's kind, and I know even though he got smoked by Federer a few months ago when they were gambling, um, he's been playing 10 ball really well, and that moving game will really go and be in his favor. But I don't know, Mike. I really,
You think he can
Yap's a good
handle?
name.
Think he can handle 7, 8 matches in a row like that?
What do you mean? Because of his age? Is that what
Yeah.
you mean? Yeah, I do. And I'll be completely honest. I'm not that guy who like thinks that Alex is like the end all be all. Like some other fans are. I got a lot of respect for his game. 1,000% I do. But I've been one of those guys where it's been like, man, maybe is he over the hill? Is he like in the twilight of his career? And then it's like he still goes deep in all these events, and uh uh it's it's mind blowing to me how he can still be as consistent all these years. I think not having Dennis there is going to be massive because Dennis is Dennis, and uh, you know he's a he's he's a menace to a lot of guys, for lack of a better word, uh, and it can kind of really. He's got that it factor as well. But Yap's a good name. Oi's a good name. I know when I saw Chua go and play Oi last year in the World 10 Ball, it was one of the best matches I've ever seen in my life. Um, I hope he goes and comes back, but I don't know, if he will. Um, I wouldn't be surprised if Yap's there, man. Now that I think about it more, just because the kid's just so poised, under pressure, and a lot of these guys who are playing in that Predator series really have shown that they can go and maintain throughout. Like there's been a lot of guys who have been very consistent, the Rolands of the world, the Robertos, guys who maybe haven't been clutch before, they're becoming clutch because of that format, Mike.
Right. I think you're right. I think the guys who've played in all the Predator 10 ball events and have consistently done well, I think that those are the guys who you'd probably consider to be threats in this.
Yeah, absolutely. But I'm looking forward to it. And this is great for a guy like you because I really covet the term world champion. I don't take it for granted like some of my other counterparts over here. I love seeing a world champion being crowned, and it's really a special time of year. In our sport, we only get it twice, and I know 9 ball will always be like the king of the game, right? But that world 10 ball championship is something pretty special to watch, and I got a lot of respect for what Ozzy and Predator and them go and do.
Well, they're going to have World 8 ball this year too. So
Yeah, I know, but I was going to ask you about that, Mike, because it's going to be during the European Open. So I'm curious to hear your opinion on that, like the scheduling on top of each other.
I'm I'm assuming somehow or another it's all going to they'll get worked out. This idea of we can start we do a whole different show on how WPA sanctioned events get stacked on top of each other.
It's crazy.
You know, they use the same calendar we use, 12 months, 30 days in most of them. Figure it out, guys. So I don't know how you come up with these conflicts. And I've spent, a lot of time on the phone with, both Matchroom and Predator since all this, and there's always two sides to every story. It's just always hard for me to figure out how they can be so different.
Yeah.
But it's unfortunate, and it's something that the WPA's got to get their hands on and their arms around now and figure out how to sort through this, because if they don't, it's just going to get worse in the coming years. Because the easiest thing to do is everybody's just going to start throwing events in the calendar 2-3 years out and saying that they've got these dates booked, and it's just going to be a big shit show. So, I love that Predators doing their own events and are doing 10 ball, and that Matchroom is putting together this big collective of 9 ball events. I think that's good for the sport. I think it's good for opportunities. I think it's good for the players. But there's got to be some kind of mediation clearinghouse, which the WPA theoretically is supposed to be.
That ought to be what they should do, Mike.
It's easy to say that they should just do that. There's a lot of nuance and a lot of uncertainty in putting events like this together. You just can't say. Someone like Matchroom can't look ahead to next year and say, these are our dates for these events. Can't do it. Because you're talking about a company that's got television contracts. You've got to try to find the right windows where the television provider is going to be able to fit you in and not have you against World Cup soccer or whatever. You've got decisions that you have to make that are based on that, and based on all the other events that Matchroom does for other sports. You just can't. This isn't the only thing they do. So it's very difficult for them to be as nimble and as far out timeline wise as some of these other, like the Euro Tour. The Euro Tour's probably got 2025 dates already for the Austrian, Euro Tour tournament. And it's kind of silly that things get to that point. So you don't want to see it end up ruining the sport by this fighting for positioning, jockeying for dates. There's got to be a better way to sort it out so that both sides win. And that's what they're going to have to figure out. And if the WPA wants to, show its mettle and prove its weight, this is the time to do it.
I don't see Matchroom going and budging. but I also don't want to go and see it turn into a pissing contest either.
Right.
I don't know where that medium is, Mike. I don't know where that middle ground is. Um, it like I don't. We're gonna see everybody in Europe, at least majority of great players, because they're gonna be fighting for Mosconi Cup points. So um, I guess you would kind of get a pass this year because this is really the thickest that it's ever been as far as pool events. And I know they've been trying to schedule out Puerto Rico for like 3 years now, at least.
Yeah.
Um, so I guess I can kind of understand that. But yeah, it'd be hard for me to see Matchroom accommodating anybody, And if you start having these alphas who are just going to dig their heels in, I don't know how pleasant it's going to end up as far as events. Um, but you know, I'm not saying that one's doing more than the other because they're both doing great things for the game.
Right.
I think as far as coverage goes, Matchroom is leading the charge because they get markets all over the world and on television, and I don't see them slowing down any. And actually, I think it's the opposite. I think they're going to keep on just ramping up and adding events and making the calendar just even tougher to kind of pick around. But I don't want to see something like as what could be special in an 8 ball world championship uh, take a loss, because that could
Right.
really be a great event. It could really be fun and exciting. And really, 8 ball is the first game that everybody, if you ever picked up a cue, plays. Your first time, whether you're at the bar or you're at your uncle's place with a pool table, the first game you ever go and look at is 8 ball, right? So I would love to go and see all the great players go out there. I'd love to see Darren Appleton go and play 8 ball and win another world championship. So um, but yeah, I mean, we'll see. We'll see what happens. I mean, there's a lot of time. I hope they would get it figured out. I just don't know how easy it is to go and say like, oh yeah, they'll figure it out, because I'm sure there's so many moving parts to go and announce that date. Whatever it is, like 7 months in advance.
Right.
Um, that their hands just may be tied this year. And, we'll see what happens. Um, but either way, Mike, it's a good problem to have, because there's going to be a lot of great events to go and watch. I buy Dazzin for the year, and I enjoy every minute of it. Now it's just every event they go and add on, it just makes what I pay for that package just that much better and better and better. As much as I love watching boxing, I'm not buying Dazzin for boxing. I'm buying it to go and watch pool, right? So as that calendar fills up, it's like fantastic because I'm still getting the same value.
Get
We want
more
to see
events.
people with, yeah, 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 for sure, and we want to see those big players figure out a way to make it work together. But they're kind of just stretching their arms a little bit, and just give me some room over here. Let me see what I can get away with, and how we can go and work together. And I hope they do, and I'm guessing they will. But
You
time
hope
will
they do
tell.
because you don't want to see the players lose out on big events that they could play in. And you talk about there's two ways to look at it in terms of the exposure. And Matchroom does have these markets all over the world. You know, they're paid to watch markets, right? It's their programs all pay to view. And I like what Predator's done with the free streaming. So
Right.
uh, that's a different way of approaching it. It's how to get as many eyes on the sport as we can, and eyes on the sport who may not always, if I'm a casual, just maybe sticking my toe in the water, I might just watch out of curiosity. I'm not subscribing to DAZN, but I might
That's
watch
true. Yeah.
something that's on live stream, right? And so then if I watch something that's on live stream and I get excited about it, then yeah, now I might go spend my $19 on the zone and watch the World Championship or watch Mosconi Cup. So they can work, they can benefit each other, and
Makes
they
sense,
certainly
Mike. I never thought of
benefit
it
the.
like that.
I'm sorry.
I said that makes a lot of sense because I've never thought of it like that.
So they're just, they're both doing. I got a ton of respect for both Predator and CSI, and as a team, and for Matchroom. A ton of respect for both, and they think they both really want to see the sport succeed. And they both have selfish interests as well as wider interests in wanting to see the sport succeed as well. But they're going about it two different ways, and it's not like one way's right and one way's wrong. but you got to find a way to get them both to work out because it's to everybody's mutual benefit. So, how you get to that, I'm not 100% sure. I wrote to Ian Anderson at the WPA and asked him about it, and not surprisingly, I got kind of a nondescript, mealy mouth kind of answer from the WPA, which is what they specialize in. So it's time for them to kind of, step up and do what they're supposed to do. If they're not putting on events, they should at least be able to help the people who are trying to make the sport bigger, help them make the sport bigger.
Yeah, and help them work together,
Yeah.
which is what it needs. And it's a really good time in the game. It's great to be able to have these debates, whether it's about what should take precedent over the next, what event could be more coveted, I guess, what game is better, whatever it is. As long as we're talking about pool, I'm all for it.
Yeah.
Mike, I appreciate you joining on. We're already been on for an hour. Um, yeah, man, it's been it's
Where
been a
did
lot
the
of
time
fun.
go?
Yeah, I know, no kidding, right? But I'm gonna say it on this. If ever there's gonna be a Reyes Cup, my ass is gonna be there, and I hope you will be too, Mike. And you may
I
be
would.
one of the
I'd
quote
be
unquote
there. I'd be there in a minute.
100 people there. We'll be two of the 100 that are gonna go and be there watching it. It's gonna be fantastic, and I'm really grateful for everything going on, and it's gonna be an exciting 22, man.
It should be. It should be. We're looking forward to a lot of big events, and see if it rolls into next year. The way the plan is coming out is to make next year even more structured and bigger and more important, and just kind of
Right.
keep building on it from there. So, yeah, let's get to it.
Absolutely. Well, on that note, you guys, we're gonna call it a night. We appreciate it, Mike. I appreciate you, man. You stepping in, coming clutch for me as always. So, Michael
Bye.
Panozzo, Billiards Digest Magazine. You guys have a good night.